One of my favorite winter patterns in this series, and we're going to start off with the improved Jack Flash Midge. I kind of came up with this pattern after fishing the Jack Flash for a while, and it was really successful, and I wanted to make it better. So we'll be tying this in a size 20 and 22 today to show you two of my favorite variations of it, and on a Tiemco 2487 hook. For our threads, we're going to be using black Semperfli silk and A-Dot camel in uni thread. I really like the color of this camel, and it's been very successful for me. For our tailing material, we are going to be using Coq de Leon. For our ribbing, we'll be using sulky thread for our size 20. And for our size 22, we're going to be using extra small gold wire. For our thorax, we're going to be using peacock herl instead of dubbing. I really like how peacock herl looks in the water. And we'll be adding crystal flash for our wings. I kind of developed this pattern after kind of mimicking the Manhattan Midge, which has been very successful for me, and the Chocolate Thunder, because I really like that gold ribbing. And I also really like the Coq de Leon, as it adds kind of a more realistic profile to it. The feathers are really slim, and they're also barred, which I feel gives a nice realistic look to it. For our first fly, we'll be tying this in our A-Dot uni thread. And we'll just lock in up here, roughly 1 eye length back. And trim off our extra material. And for the 20, we're going to be using the sulky metallic material for our ribbing. I really like this thread for my ribbing because it's extra shiny and creates a really nice rib if you can get it bound up nice and tight. So we're going to tie this back to a little further than the bend of the hook. In the winter, I typically like to fish this pattern in a size 20, 22, and 24. The 24 I will typically fish as my third fly in my 3-fly rig, as we get 3 flies in Colorado. For the size 22, I'll typically fish it as my second fly, and the 20 I will fish as my second fly or my point, depending on how picky the fish are getting. And we are actually lucking out today, and I have just enough feathers on the tip of this Coq de Leon to tie those straight in. I might actually pull a couple off. Typically I like to get roughly 10 to 15 feathers in there because I like it a little thick. And I'll try to get that as close to the back of the ribbing as possible. Get that tied in. And I like to get it at roughly 1 shank length for the tailing. It looks like we just nailed that here. We're going to advance forward. Make sure you have no gaps in the thread. You don't want your Coq de Leon poking through. Not like it really matters, but I like to make sure it's well covered. And I'm going to take that to 1 eye length back. Snip off the rest of this material. I'm going to reposition this fly, pitch it up a little bit so our thread's not slipping off the top of the hook. And I add 1 hitch to lock this thread in place and throw it in my bobbin holder so it's out of the way when I'm doing this ribbing. Now for this sulky material, I do like to give it a few extra turns to really tighten that thread up. When using this sulky, you really need to make sure that you're going with the twist of the thread, because if you don't, you will unwind it. It's kind of hard to get back wound. Usually with this fly we can get a good 4 or 5 good ribs fit in there with this material. This 5th rib will likely get covered up. As you can see, it's unwinding a little bit, so we gotta get that nice and tight. I managed to misplace my Stanfo material grip this week as I re-cleaned my desk. And I don't know why I did that. A messy desk is easier to find materials on, I find. Okay, and now we're going to clip off this material. Take the thread back a little bit, cover up our cut. Make a little space to add our peacock curl. As you can see, we're going to kind of cover up that last rib there. And we're going to get a nice piece of peacock in here. I typically like to grab from the eye of the peacock because it's a little thinner than the body portion. When picking from the eye, I do typically snip this back a fair amount because the beginning of this material is fairly brittle, and it's annoying when it breaks on you. Get that tied in. Nice and tight. Pass the thread back. Now, when tying this material, I like to try and get the top of the fly, or top of the feather facing forward, so it ribs backwards. But if that doesn't happen, like it's looking like in this fly, it doesn't really matter. Good few wraps in there to really create a nice thorax. And tie that off. Snip off our peacock curl. And our last little bit is we will be adding in our wing material, which is our crystal flash. For the crystal flash, I usually like to grab one piece of tinsel and I'll double it over. I have seen a few videos when they do the No Mercy, or not, when they do the Jack Flash fly and use 2 pieces of tinsel, but with one you can waste less material because you can double it over like so and capture the end, so you're not wasting anything. Well, you're wasting very little. Okay, 2 or 3 locking wraps. Pull back our flash material. Get a couple more locking wraps in there. Straighten it out a little bit. And we'll add a couple whips to finalize and lock down this material. Do 3 nice loops there. Lock that in. Make sure it's nice and tight. You can add head cement to this if you want. I typically don't. Snip these wings. I usually like to go a little further back than the peacock curl. And there you have it. There's our size 20 improved Jack Flash. Oops, got a nice tail in there too. Now we're going to tie in our 22. For the size 20, I typically fish that in the beginning and end of winter when the midges are starting to get a little bit bigger. And I'll fish it as my second fly. For the size 22, I will usually fish this as my second fly in a 3-fly rig as well. Now we're going to be using black for this one. Again, starting a little bit back from the eye of the hook. This Semperfli material is a little slippery. Get that locked in. And if you haven't used Semperfli silk before, and this is a size 18 aught, it is a bit hard to cut, but if you get yourself a good pair of scissors, snip really well. I found the Tiemco scissors to work pretty well. They are a little pricey, but well worth it if you're using a lot of Semperfli silks. Next, we're going to add in our rib, which is going to be this extra small gold wire. Taking that pack past the bend. Next, our Coq de Leon. Again, we're going to try to grab around 10 to 15 fibers here. Maybe more, just an estimate. I typically like to grab more just because if you haven't used Coq de Leon before, the fibers tend to be different lengths within the feather. So like, grabbing more, you usually get better luck at having enough feathers for your tail. We're going to lock that in as close to the back as we can. Good 3 wraps should do it. And let's check the length. We're at roughly 1 shank length. That's good for me. We're gonna wrap forward. Nice tight wraps all the way forward. If you do get some spaces in your thread, the nice thing about these 18-aught Superfly Silks is that you can double wrap it and you're not going to actually see a difference because it is very small. We're going to reposition our fly here a little bit. Lock in a whip. Throw in a bobbin cradle. If you do not have a bobbin cradle, a pint glass I have found works very well. It sits at a pretty good height. Just don't knock it over. For our ribbing here, we're going to try to get as tight and close as possible, getting in a good 6 or 7 wraps, evenly spaced. Close to evenly spaced. I don't think the trout will care. Break off this material here. Add some good tension to your wire. Pull and twist. It pops right off. Next, we're going to be adding our peacock. Again, trying to get pretty close to the tip of that peacock pearl. This one's a little wider than I usually go, but it'll be nice and buggy. Clip off a good inch or two from the front. And let's tie that in. Back to our second rib here. Lock it in. Work back forward. Let's actually try to clip off this extra material. There we go. And then let's get our wraps going. Let's get this thing. Oh, it broke. Bummer. I'm just gonna redo that. No problem. It happens. Okay. As you can see, this peacock adds a nice body to this fly, or nice thorax. Push these fibers back a little bit. Good 3 wraps should do it for this size 22. Lock in this. Now, I do see a lot of people pulling off their peacock, but I don't like to do that because sometimes it comes undone. And last but not least, we are going to add our crystal flash. Again, we're going to double it over. Get those ends as close to even as possible so you waste less material. And lock those in. Perfect. We'll pull these back. Lock them in so they're nice and backwards. And with the Superfly Silk, you can give it a couple good tight pulls to make sure that head is nice and seated. And being that the thread's so small, it doesn't matter if you have extra wraps. And then I'll snip these back. We'll about a millimeter further than Pearl. And we'll whip finish. And that is the improved No Mercy Midge. Fish this on your local tailwater. I've found it very effective over at Williams Fork. If you're willing to trek that in the winter. It's also a very good fly for the Arkansas and South Platte River. Get that locked in. There we go. And there you have it. Size 20. Improved Jack Flash in black. Make sure you give a good like and subscribe. I'll be posting my next fly here in a few days. And we'll create your 3-fly tandem rig.